Good morning. The Kyokun is, I guess, my favorite writing by Dogen. Not only is it the most accessible, I mean, it's the one where he's the most straightforward with the story that he's telling, um, with the concepts he's explaining. But it's also the one where he comes, to my mind, the closest to talking about love in this tradition, particularly at the end when he comes to the uh, concept of sanshin. And I always come back to it eventually. You know, it might take years for me to circle back to reading it, you know, the way we do with certain things like Zen mind, beginner's mind. You know, just wait another 10 years and pick it up again, and it's totally different. You know, it's not totally different. I'm totally different. And so whatever meaning I glean from it is also new to me. So from the Tenzo Kyokun, it is written in the Changman Chingui that the function of the Tenzo is to manage meals for the monks. The work has always been carried out by teachers settled in the way and by others who have aroused the bodhisattva spirit within themselves. Such a practice requires exerting all your energies. If a man entrusted with the work lacks such a spirit, or a woman, then he will endure unnecessary hardships and suffering that have no value in this pursuit of the way. Again, even when we talked about the monkey, this is kind of addressed to monastics, but always there's a way in for those of us who are not. I had a conversation, was it yesterday, the other day? Time doesn't mean anything. About my old job. And I think I told you at some point during this time together that I used to be a worker for social services. I used to be a case manager, and I did all these applications for benefits, for every benefit there is in the world. I had a tough time at that job. I remember when I accepted the job, I had been offered that job, the social service job, and a job at a library. Social services, of course, paid more than the library, um, but also what was in my mind is, oh, I can help people, and that I knew what it meant to help people and be useful in society. Unfortunately, I don't think I was very good at that job. I genuinely like people. Most of the people I meet, you know, I I enjoy them. you know, um, it's very rare. I don't think there are um, people who are completely evil or completely good. And all people are interesting, complicated. So I thought I was the people person that around the time that I was working there. That was a big, you know, catchphrase. I'm a people person, whatever that means. Doesn't mean anything. And so I went into this job and I worked there for 20 years, trying my best to be a people person, helping people, making things better in the world. But what I was really doing was taking this sort of prescribed way of helping people. You know, we think that jobs like social services and all that, are automatically, you know, made to help, intending to help. But there's a lot of politics behind everything that comes, you know, in this society uh, that are not necessarily exactly what we think. And it took me a few years to figure that out. And so I spent years of frustration um, doing intakes and doing applications and sitting across from people in dire straits who, from a young woman who, lost her job and sitting there with two children and her um, disabled sister's child, you know, trying to make trying to make it in the world, just trying to feed herself and these babies. To, someone who just had a catastrophic diagnosis, whose insurance is not going to cover it, even though they've been working hard all their lives. Um, and about to go bankrupt, after all, this doing what she thought or what she was told she was supposed to do all her life. To refugees that just got off a plane from Sudan, wearing coats that, children wearing coats that are too small, who've never worn coats before, and who are about to, sitting in the, winter of North Carolina, as mild as it is, and are about to be sent off to Minnesota because North Carolina is not going to take care of them. So there was a whole system to send them, plane ticket and everything. How much was that cost? To another state. So this state didn't have to worry about them. And I was a part of that. I spent a lot of time, wasted a lot of time, in the bathroom, the staff bathroom, crying because I felt so helpless and so powerless. Meanwhile, these people outside needed something, and I'm feeling sorry for me. I had a supervisor once, a young lady, beautiful young lady, who, when she did my um, assessment, for the year, how much raise you're going to get, told me that I was not sympathetic. And I didn't know what she meant. I was going home, burnt out, heartbroken, in complete despair over this system I was part of. And yet she said I had no sympathy. And I didn't argue with her. I couldn't, no word could come out of my mouth, because if I didn't know on the surface that she was right, I knew underneath. Doing a job and not seeing what you're doing because the wind is blowing so hard and knocking you off balance. The wind of emotion, of the ego that says, I'm supposed to be able to do this. The ego that says that I am helping. The ego that says, that I am failing to help. All of those things. Wind's just blowing you off your little pedestal up there. all day long. You know, it's not that we're not supposed to have emotions. It's not that I'm not supposed to feel for those children sitting there. They don't smile. They don't speak. They're not making a sound. You know, social services is, for the most part, a riot every day because people come in and they don't have any place to, those children have been sitting in the lobby, in the waiting room for hours. You better not tell them to sit down and be quiet. How can they? And yet there were children that came in that were stiff, that were frozen, that were so traumatized. You didn't even have to ask the question, are you okay? Because they're not. And then all you can say at the end of that conversation is, you'll hear from us in 30 days. Send this in and you'll hear from us in 30 days, maybe 90. And in doing my assessment, my supervisor, she could see all this, I'm not saying she was a nice person, she was an efficient lady. And she needed to get her team together and get us done. But all that wind blowing, took me off my balance. And I couldn't stand upright and be what I needed to be for those people. I went to Zazen on Sunday nights down in the city. And I went up to Asheville to do my sessions with Tejo. And I was, trying so hard. This is going to help me. This is what this is supposed to do. This has got to help me, be stronger, be more clear about things. Clarity was a big word in, my vocabulary. It still is, but whatever. And I thought that's what this practice was supposed to do. And it wasn't until I laid that all down and figured out, that it's not just the sitting. The work that you do in the world is also practice. And the attitude that you come to that work with is the quality of your practice. Just like the Tenzo in the kitchen. How are you going to feed somebody if you can't even stay at the stove, hot as it is? Years later, I went to the Nisoto and I was disappointed because I was assigned to Tenzo Ryo. And in my mind, I wouldn't have said this, but when I thought I was going to the Nisoto to Ango, and Nisoto, if I need to explain it, is a women's convent in Nagoya. I thought, I'm going to get the opportunity to go in here and really get the forms down. And I'm going to be, they put me in Cheat and Ryo. I'll finally get, my cheating skills together. If they put me in Ino Ryo, I'll get those skills together. Because in my tiny temple, the opportunity to really, practice with those forms wasn't even, possible. Not really, because it's only two of us. So I felt I was missing that. And they put me in the kitchen. Now, I had been Tenzo de facto for most of the time that I was at Great Tree. And so I'd been in the kitchen a lot. Part of, Sachin for me was I had to cook. Tejo would do breakfast and I would do lunch and dinner because they were the more, complicated meals. And so I was kind of like over it already. Like, but they put me in the kitchen. And at Great Tree, in the kitchen, I was competent. I'm not a good cook. I cook something, and I don't care if you have a recipe there. It's going to come out different every time. What for whatever reason, I can't even explain it. It's always different. Carrot soup tastes one way 1 week when I do it. A couple of weeks later, is this the same soup? Yeah. I'm not really consistent. I went to the Ninisoto and got thrown in the kitchen, and it was the hardest work I've ever done. It was, there were times when we were in that kitchen for 17 hours. And from the beginning of the day to the end, and somewhere in there, we got shoved into lectures. We had to do our part in terms of the different jobs that people took turns with, whether it was opening the gate in the morning, banjo in the um, at morning service. Um, Something that I remember is called opening the pillow at night, where you went around chanting the Heart Sutra and you closed the gate. We all had to take care of those, wake up bell, all of that, squeezed in between, taking care of that kitchen, cleaning up the dishes, wiping the floor, washing the plastic bags, feeding the cat. It was a lot of stuff, you know, and I was really disappointed and I was always really tired. And just to show you, by the time I got there, I was still finding, myself in bathrooms weeping, you know, 'cause my body's so tired. And I'm far away from home. And yeah, and I don't speak the language. And that was blowing me around, for at least a month out of those 5. But somewhere in there, and this is the beauty of Sangha, in working with all those women who were going through the same thing I was, not necessarily exactly, but the same thing. They were away from home. Some of them away from children, um, having to do this hard work all day long, every day, no break, no break. And something about that, doing it together in monastic practice, you figure it out easier. That's why, being in lay life is harder than monastic practice because, yeah, there's a tune there that you're going to catch on to. And I figured out that everything that I was doing was in service. I wasn't there to learn how to cook. I wasn't there to learn how to ring the bell. I wasn't there to learn, the sutras, to chant the sutras, though that was part of, this is a school, Soto is a school. That's on the surface what they're there to teach us. But in all of those things, learning to do those things is really in service to the Sangha. When the time drum goes in the morning and it's telling the time to the whole temple, not just me. It's telling the Tenzo that it's 7 and 3/4. And the Tenzo knows what time it is. A service to the Tenzo and knows they have so much more time to get the meal together. Um, when we ring the bells during service, those bells are beautiful, but they're not just music. They're sit up, sit down. It's move on to the next thing. It's bow, you know. And really what we're learning to do is not just to make them sound pretty, of course you all know this, but to be consistent and to help each other get through this service together in harmony. You know, in the monastery, one day you're the Tenzo, and the next day you're the bathroom. You're cleaning the bathroom. And there's no difference between those two because the value to the people to the Sangha, to the people we're here with is important. Not the person, not me, but the action. Please keep me on time because I don't have the clock. So that's what I got from that practice there in that kitchen. And I look back and what if I had that understanding that it wasn't me? Because even in the realm of social services, it was all, rotating around this empty ego person and nothing got done. When I got back to Great Tree and I truly stepped into the role of Tenzo with that gracious teaching that I received from those women at the Nisoto, it was different. I didn't come back with any recipes. I had some ideas of, some different foods and stuff like that, but I didn't come back with a book of recipes. I came back and I wasn't any more skillful at cooking. But there was a mindfulness that of what I was doing this for. I was making food for my teacher. I was making food for the people that came to Sesshin and were, working so hard to really understand the practice. And that was giving them nourishment, be able to sit there for those 8-9 periods and get through it with healthy food in their stomach. I learned how to cook. One of the things that would always drive me crazy is because, and when you're cooking for not even a lot of people, but for different people who have different needs, gluten-free, dairy-free. It's like, oh my God, 50 cookbooks trying to figure this out. When I got back, I didn't need a cookbook. I just figured it out. I just paid attention. I tasted it. When something didn't work, I just tried until it worked. I was taking care of the food much better. Back in the Ninisoto, one of the things about food was that we had to, when they had new rice, they got rice from the farm and you had to still pick out pebbles and bugs and stuff. And that was like almost a meditation in that. That didn't happen at Great Tree because, we get it off the, shelf and it's already clean. But, just paying attention to what food does and how, how it reacts when you cook it. How not to, make people sick and try to keep everything clean. just paying attention. And the odd thing was, like I said, I can't cook. I'm not even going to claim that now. But something happened and people kept saying, oh, this is so good. I love this soup. Still, didn't taste the same way from one day to the other. But, whatever it happened that day, I was able to put my mind to it and really address it, really take care of it well enough. And that's not some, bragging or anything, because there were plenty of times when it didn't work, when I didn't work, but I could see it. And there was a great joy in doing that. I suddenly loved to cook. I loved, you know, experiment, you know. I learned to make mac with no cheese, and it actually tasted like something to me, and other people liked it. That was more important. Um, and, I learned, what Tejo could tolerate in terms of, she's um, I used to think that Tejo liked bland food, and it is kind of bland. It's like, because it's a spice. Um, there's a aesthetic of spice, for different people, and hers is a little different. But I learned to take that into account when I'm doing it, and wasted a little less food doing that. You know, I learned to use the ends of vegetables and make um, stock, vegetable stock from it, and it became almost a hobby. Something so simple, you know. And maybe, the creativity that I gained from being at the Nisoto and just paying attention and being mindful and being, present with it, and understanding that this was not for um, not for cooking and being a great cook, um, but for this triple treasure. And maybe if I had that same mind way back when, it may not have fixed everything, but it may have, you know, made a little bit more, might have seen a little bit more joy in the fact that of being there really for people. I might not have stayed at that job so long. I might have found some other way, because, the toxic things in our culture around taking care of people who are poor. And I'm not going to say what on, because there's really no such thing as poor. We're rich, society. When there's a pile of stuff over there, nobody should really be poor. There's some greedy folks, but how can we be poor and have so much? But that's another story. I could go off on that, and I don't have time. It says in the Tenzo Kyokun, maintain an attitude that tries to build great temples from ordinary greens, that expounds Buddha Dharma through the most trivial activity. Whatever my job is, whatever my work is, that attitude, whatever I'm handed, whether it's, crazy policy or, you know, withered greens or, you know, a bell to ring, treated as if it's just another jewel in the net, that we're treated with as if it was the most, I don't want a word I'm going to say. Why do I go off track? The great jewel that it is. And let it help in the way it's meant to help. It's never ordinary. It's ordinary, but it's not. It's still of value. It still has the power to transform into love and caring. I'm panicking because I don't know what time it is. But anyway, 10:52. So I got till 11. Oh my God. I'm not gonna do that. Oh, thank you. And what I'm talking about here, if you hadn't got it already, of course you have, is Sanshin, the magnanimity, and I can't say that word very well, but to stand upright in the wind, to not let despair, emotion, even your sympathy blow me down, roll me all over the place, and just feel myself getting battered while I'm not helping anything in that state. Magnanimity, I kind of found in the sisterhood of that Sangha, where we were all tired. We were all putting in this great effort. We were all dealing with our delusions together. And that's kind of, like I said, it's kind of easy when everybody's on the same page, like here. It's not so easy when you're out in the world working at social services, and some parts of that world are working against the good we're trying to do. And there's also parental mind, which we sometimes forget. I think that's, in all of us. We all know that in order to help ourselves, we have to help others. Some of the loneliness I think that's in this society is, and this feeling of powerlessness, is that we don't know how useful we are to other people, even in the slightest, tiniest ways. For me, the way to kind of break the loneliness that, yeah, I sometimes feel, is to get up and not so much, seek to do something for myself. We had this whole, culture of well-being and wellness and all of that. And all of that is wonderful. And all of that is necessary and needed. Definitely go to that spa if you need to go. But that's very lonely. When I get up from the spa bed it'd be nice to, go home and take a little, page from the massage therapist and give my sister a back rub and make that contact and make myself understand that I am capable of making things better, even in the smallest. It's the, it's a balm for that helplessness sometimes feel. Or just to go out, and, work at a soup kitchen for a day. Or, I don't know, visit an elderly relative, you know. These are not small nothings. This is Sangha. This is a treasure. This is what can help with the burnout sometimes. It seems like you're, oh, but I'm giving some more energy. I don't have enough energy. The energy is there. It'll come, with that contact, with that connection. Interbeing goes both ways. And that is the joy of this practice. The joy of being Tenzo with a pile of dishes, that you got to get through, before it's Tazen time, and somehow you do. And there's clean dishes the next morning for the Sangha, for the treasure. It's hard to keep thinking about it that way because we do get tired. These bodies are so delicate. I'm going to read one more thing because time. The many rivers which flow into the ocean become the one taste of the ocean. When they flow into the pure ocean of the Dharma, there are no such distinctions as delicacies or plain food. There is just one taste, and it is the Buddha Dharma, the world itself as it is. I had a uncle teacher, Taiken Yokoyama, Taiken-san. And I was scared to death of that man. He could be very tough. But there was one point where we were all standing in a room at Ango, and he said, one taste, one taste. And he tried to explain it. And he's like, we're all together here, one taste. And I didn't know what he was talking about then. But at some point, I went back to the Tenzo Kyokun, and there it was. That's what this process, this practice is about, whether you're a monastic or whether you're out in the street. And I keep saying out in the street because, I don't know, I'm thinking of the streets of the Bronx. When you're out there in the world, taking care of business, the attitude to embody Sanshin, magnanimity, you know what I'm saying? Care, parental mind, and joy. It's the kind of Well, it is connected to the Brahma Viharas and all kinds of things in the sutras. And that's, I think, Dogen's way of saying and not saying love. Or maybe it's just our translation because, we're so tough and heady and intellectual. How about love, a little bit? So that's what I have to say today, and I hope I haven't run over too much. I don't know whether this is a time for question and answer thing, but I'm probably beyond that anyway. But I'm sorry. Okay, that's good. Well, thank you all for listening. And if you have anything that you'd like to comment, any question you'd like to ask, please do. I'll try my best. Oh, we do that first? Okay.
We have time for questions, if anybody has any questions for Chimyo.
Well, first, thank you for your talk. I certainly appreciate it. It sounds like one of the things you were talking about was finding stability and composure in discomfort. Sometimes when you can't, there's a whole lot of things that are happening outside and you need to be composed within that. And I bring that up because today I came here and I haven't been here in a bunch of years. And I came here without a mask because the rules changed. And a lot of people apparently weren't aware that the rules had changed. And a lot of people, well, several people got a little bit upset. They said, oh, you have to wear a mask. And we, showed the rule and a conversation we had with somebody here online. So anyway, I just want to say I didn't mean to make anybody uncomfortable or throw anybody off their balance by not wearing a mask. But on the other hand, I appreciate everyone's composure if they were a bit surprised by that. Thank you.
Well, we can't necessarily do anything about what blows other people off, but maybe we can take a look at, maybe you got a little bit blown when you walked in and everything had changed. That's what you have to work with. Be cognizant and be kind and respectful for other people's discomfort, but also look at our own discomfort and what we're doing, what that means, why, And thank you for your comment.
I really enjoyed your discussion of your social service career. And I'm just curious, when is the time to try to find stability in your career versus changing the system that you felt so uncomfortable with? It's, I think a lot of us are brushing up against systems that make us feel bad, like you felt bad in the bathroom. So I'm just curious, like, what are your thoughts on when to be stable versus when to brush back against it?
Well, in order to change something, you have to be stable. It's not either or. It's not, I'm distressed by something that's wrong. And so I take that distress and somehow think that that's going to change anything. When you come, and it doesn't mean that you don't go out there and you fight for what's right. But in order to, and I want to take that fight away, excuse me, take that negative word away. If you want to help create something better, it has to come from not just that anger and that fear or that discomfort. It has to come from a place of standing straight, and regardless of, what the situation is, what's coming at you, and see it clearly so that you're not creating something that's just as bad, because it's got to come from a place of stability. It has to come from a place of magnanimity, equanimity, true understanding of what the situation is, not just our anger and fear. So those are not two. You have to find that stability. You find that balance. Period. I had plenty of arguments at DSS. It didn't change a doggone thing. I even wrote to the governor. It didn't change a really nasty letter. It wasn't that nasty, but it didn't come from a place that was really trying to help. It came from my ego being mad and being angry and feeling powerless. It can't come from that. It has to come from the true mind, from the true clarity of it has to come from your true nature, not your delusion. The energy from anger, yeah, use it, but it can't be anger. It has to transform into the energy of what's truly needed. Hard thing to do. I'm not saying that that's easy. And I'm not saying that you have to wait until that all clears up, but because some things are emergent and emergencies right now. But make the effort. We have to make the effort to be clear. And okay. All right. Anyone else?
Thank you so much for your talk. Yeah, following up on that, how can we cultivate standing up straight, especially when there is anger or, when I do feel like crying in the bathroom? Yeah, how can we cultivate that or come to that place where we can then move and take action?
It's a lifetime of work. That's what this practice is. I started this sort of series of talks, if you want to call it that, with these tender bodies and these minds that create and make stories. And we have to continue to cultivate, this sort of understanding of what's going on. When I'm crying in the bathroom, okay, what's this about? Where's this discomfort coming from? I need to sit with it. I need to drop the ego that is, feeling sorry for itself or feeling angry because somebody don't like me, or, I think someone's trying to hurt me. And I got to set that down for a minute and really see where I am and what I'm doing and the causes and conditions that I'm, creating for this discomfort. That's practice. It's also setting it down and attending to what's happening right now. And that's practice. It's really hard to do too, because stuff is going on in my head. So I'm supposed to be ringing a bell, but I'm still mad and I totally missed that bell, and it's practicing, surfing the world, in the middle of chanting, for example, just following that chant. Whatever happened this morning, you know, that I didn't like is absent. In taking care of the kitchen, if I'm really taking care and paying attention, and if I'm really cleaning that toilet, you know, I'm dealing with what's in front of me and letting that anger or that story I made slip away, even if just for a minute. I'm probably going to pick it back up as soon as I put the sponge away. But for that minute, that's practice. Being completely with that moment, doing completely what's needed, you know. And it's hard. It's going to take a long time. And that's all I can say about it, you know. But just have a little faith in the process and the parts of you that are changing, not just the parts, but in the ways you are changing that you can't even see, simply because you're doing this practice, simply because you're opening yourself just a little bit more every time. Mhm. I want to say, just sit down and it'll work. You know, but that's a lie. And if you've been doing this a long time, you know it is. And if you've been doing this enough time, you know what? Every once in a while.
We still have a little more time for another question.
Thank you for sharing your story about your Minnesota experience. And I'm wondering about the cultural difference. And you talked about having to work for 17 hours. That's a part of the training. I can totally see the value of it. You were pushed to the limit where the ego gets really shattered or, pushed to the limit. But if you do that here, I think people are going to strike, or protest. And so myself too, coming from Japan, I had a taste of that practice when I stayed at the Japanese temple. So the difference, I guess, how do we do that? Like, I can see that the hierarchy there, were clearly serving because people understood. And it was used as a practice to push oneself to the limit. But that can be translated, that won't be translated here. So how do you bring that practice here?
Gee, I wish I knew how to answer that question. Maybe not so much bring that practice here because, you hit it on the nose. That's a real cultural difference. There are expectations in the Japanese places that I've been that are, no way, we get sued. Yeah. But, there is something to that. And when you said what you said about ego, when I walked into the Nisoto, one of the first things that was said to me, we are going to crush your ego. We are going to, there was a woman there, she gave me this bracelet when I left, this mama. And she recently passed away a couple of months ago. So I never got to see her again. And, she was just like, I thought she had it in for me. But I think she was, when I look back on it, maybe she's had some hope for me. Because one of the things she said, and she didn't even know me. I'd been there one day. You have a big ego. yeah, you know, America did this. Yeah. And that's something we have to deal with. And it doesn't mean that we have to beat people up. You know, the other thing is that, you know, in Japan, even in the Nisoto, there were some older women there who'd been there a long time. But for the most part, there's young people. And physically, we can't push people like that here because most of us come, we're, you know, over 30, you know, nobody remembers Logan Run. But yeah, we're not young folks. And we have a certain level of comfort that we've been living in, you know, all of our lives from the cradle and expectations. So we have to figure out other ways to crush that ego and maybe not use the word crush, you know, dissolve or something more, I don't know, maybe not so gentle. But yeah, that's the thing. You know, that's what we're trying to get beyond here is this ego, that this is about me. And we can say that all the time, you know, it's almost a catchphrase. It's not about you. And then we turn around and walk out the door. Yes, it is. You know, how do we do that? I had my ego crushed and I had my ego crushed moment at the Nisoto when I had the job of cleaning the steps outside, you know, outside of the hato. And one nun told me that I could use a certain broom and mop, and I didn't have to get on my hands and knees to do it because she saw me out there doing it on my hands and knees. And so for a couple of weeks, that's what I did. And nobody said anything to me. There were other things that I did that were not correct. And Japanese folks would come at me and yell at me, oh, dame, dame. And I would just go and just put it away. And, you know, and say, sumimasen, oh, whatever. I had to say, go inside, whatever, you know, whatever phrases I knew to say, because I couldn't argue with them. Around this broom, another woman came. She was an American, and she came and she took the broom out of hand. You're not supposed to use that, you know, that broom. You know, this is for blah, blah, blah. If she had said that in Japanese and, you know, just taken the broom and walked away, I went and got my towel and started wiping. I know I would have. But because she was speaking English, I had my opportunity to argue and tell her how right I was and why I was doing it and blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. And she looked at me, she walked away with the broom, you know. And I stood there and I almost cried, you know, because that ego just came right on out because it had a space to argue, a space to be right, a space to say, you have no right to tell, no. I went and got my towel and, you know, wiped the tears because you could see it right there. You know, the opportunity for the ego to just come right up, you know, put yourself in a situation like that, which is kind of extreme. When we're talking about extreme situations, whether it's extreme mentally or extreme physically, where you don't have the chance to say no. You always do, but yeah, and ego falls away. What in this culture helps us to do that? You know, it has to be kind of harsh. It has to kind of hurt your feelings, you know, to make me see it. Maybe that's just me. I don't know. You have to be told you're not sympathetic to really touch that understanding that you already know. So I don't know how we do that here, but we do have to think about it because there's something, you know, there's something in the Japanese practice in my opinion, that we tend to lose because we don't know really what it is that it's actually doing. We see the outer part of it, and we can imitate that to some extent, but without the context, we don't really get it. And as we go on generation after generation, without really sitting down and thinking about it and figuring it out, without really talking to those Japanese teachers who, are doing this, not saying that they all know what's going on either, but, if we're in this tradition, we need to understand a little bit deeper, where we're going. And it's not impossible, I don't think. We just have to do that. But we're all busy. It gets busy. Too busy to think about that. But it will happen regardless, I think. I just don't have an answer for you. But thank you for your question.
Thank you so much. Now we'll do the closing chant.
Okay.